ES2020 is here, and that's really exciting because we have some new features. That's really great. And I'm going to show you 5 of my favorites in this video, and that is the private fields and the optional chaining and the dynamic import, Nullish Coalescing. I think that's the right pronunciation. And the BigInt. So these are the 5s that I'm going to show you. And I set up this environment that I'm going to start from and not create everything from scratch here. And I'm using Parcel for this one. So I set it up to use, for example, I'm using the plugin proposal class properties. That's the one that I have to make this custom setup for. And I also set it up down here in the browser list so that we can use async or async and wait with Parcel. So that's the environment here. I've provided a link down below where you can see all the examples. So clone it or download it from the GitHub link and run npm install. Then you can start the environment with the command npm run dev, and that will start up the Parcel environment. And that's what I've done here. And I'm only going to be in the console here. That's why I have it to the left here in the browser. I'm just console log out stuff here so we can see what happens. So make sure that you check your console if you download this one and run, because it won't show you anything else in the browser. Yeah, and also I've provided this file here that's called calc.js, and this is a little module that I'm going to import in this tutorial also. And what it does is, it adds 2 numbers, and I create this module that I export here. So it's really, really simple stuff here, but it's useful to show the example where we can have dynamic module imports. Okay, so let's be in the index.js file, and I close this sidebar here. Let's start with the private fields or properties or variables in classes. So I created this class here, a starship, with a message, Mayday, please help. This starship is going down, it needs some help. And I created a method in the class here that will console log out this message. And that's all fine and everything. I create an instance of the class here, and I call the broadcast method. And it will console log it out here in the console, as you can see. I also console log out the starship.message, and it console log out just fine here. And that's also what's not fine, because I can reach into this class and grab the message from outside and just console log it out. And that means that this property here is not private. In classes, you want to be able to have some stuff to be encapsulated in the class itself. So only the class can use that property. And that hasn't been possible to do in JavaScript. But now we have these private fields and properties that we can use to achieve this. And how do you do it? Well, it's fairly simple, actually. You just put a hash symbol in front of your variable. And when you console log it out, you put it there also. So use this one all the time, the hash symbol. We can save it, see what happens. You can see that it console log it out. That's the one here. The other one where I console log it out here and reach in, we don't have this anymore here. And then you might think, we can just grab it by doing like this. We put the hash symbol there also and save it. But nah, we'll get an error because we can't reach into the class to grab this value. Private name message is not defined. So we have successfully created a private variable that only the class can use. So this is how private fields work in ES2020. Put a hash symbol before your variable, and that will make it private. So that's great. So now we can remove this one because we can't grab that value from outside of the class anymore. And everything is working as it should now. That's private fields in ES2020. Let's move on to optional chaining. I personally love this one because this will make things a lot simpler, or maybe a lot, but at least a little simpler. For example, in React, when we should map over state and props and stuff like that. So optional chaining. I created this object here with an astronaut, and the name is, of course, Thomas Weibenfalk. And I'm not an astronaut, but that's okay. My looks, I have blonde hair and I have green eyes. So this is a regular JavaScript object with a nested object inside of it. So let's play around with this object a little bit. console.log astronaut height. Let's say I want the height, and you can see, okay, how should we get the height? Because that don't exist here, okay? But let's assume that we think it exists. So we're grabbing that one from astronaut.body.height. We think that there's a property that's called body that has a property inside of it that's called height. And when we do it like this, it will give us an error because it can't find the property height of undefined. And that's not good. But now, when we have something that's called optional chaining, we can put a question mark here at that property, and we save it. And you can see astronaut height undefined. It won't give us an error. It will give us undefined instead. And that's super great, because when it gave us an error, it will cause a lot of bugs in your application. And I can show an example here of that. For example, we have a const map test astronaut.body.map, and we have the value, and we're just returning the value. This is really, really common in, for example, React, when we should map over some props or state or something like that. That state or prop may be undefined, and we try to map over it, and it will throw an error. So as you can see here, we'll get an error. But if we put this question mark here instead now, it will not give us an error. And that's super great. We don't have to do all that extra code to control this ourselves. So super great. So we can just also console log out this console.log map test. And the map test and see what it gives us. Yeah, we get undefined there also. So that's fine. This is a super neat little feature that I think actually will have a great impact when you code stuff. Okay, so that's optional chaining. Then we have the dynamic imports, and that's also something that's super great, because before this, we import stuff at the top of our code up here, for example. In this case, we can import it wherever we want and when we need it, and just use the code when we need it. And that's why I created this little module here, the calc.js. So I'm going to import that one now. I remove the sidebar and I create a little function here, const calculate equals async. It has to be an async function, and you have to load the modules in an async way. And this is, of course, also working with the usual then, if you want to use it that way instead. But I'm using async and await in my case. So we have the number 1 and number 2. And we have the function body here. So const calc equals await. And here's the magic. We import, and we have our module ./calc.js. Like that. So we await that import, and then we can console log calc.add. We're calling that add function that I created in the module. We send in num1 and number 2. Some order formatting. And then hopefully we can use this one. So calculate, and we give it a value of 10 and 15. It should be 25, right? Save it. As you can see in our console, it console log out 25. So we've successfully dynamically loaded this module here, and this is super great. And I think this will be a big one, actually, because it can replace some stuff that we do in Webpack and things like that, because this is essentially what Webpack will do for us with the modules. Okay, so that's dynamic imports, super great. And then we have the Nullish Coalescing. And as I put in the comment here, it checks if a value is null or undefined. And I created this object here also for us. We have a star with a property of name, an empty string. The age is 0, the supernova is false, and the temperature is null. So let's pretend for a second that this is data that we get back from an API. And when a value isn't set, we get the null back. And that's, let's call it a standard. We get the null back when it's not set. But in this case, we want to have this value of false. So that value is legit. And also the age 0, and that value is also legit, and an empty string here because we haven't set the name yet for this one. This is a really, really new star. It's just been born. It doesn't have a name, and it's 0 years old. Let's say that we're using this in an application, and we have a for loop. We're going to loop through this once. Const prop in star. We're looping through this object with a for in loop. And we can just console log out. I have a template literal here, I think. So I want to console log out the prop. And then I want to console log out the value for that prop. Like so. So I save this and see what we got. So we have them here, name, age, supernova, and temperature. That's great. But let's assume that we don't want to display null. So instead, we want to display no value set when there's no value that we get back from the API. And the first thing that comes up to my mind is maybe use a short circuit like this. No value set. Of course, I have to move this curly brace here like that. I think will work. So save it. And I should probably use the pipes here instead. If this one is false, it will return the value to the right here. And it actually thinks that all these values are false because an empty string evaluates to false, a 0 evaluates to false, and here we have false, and null is also false. But in this case, it's not true because these values are not false to us. With this nullish coalescing, we can check if the value is null or undefined. So that's what we're going to do. And we can do that by using question marks here instead. We save it. And as you can see, it will return these values for us. We have the empty string, we have the 0, and we have the false value. But here the value is null, so we'll get no value set instead. And this can be super useful also when you loop through things in a use case like this, for example, where you don't want to show the null values. So I think this will be really useful, and I'm going to use it a lot, I think, in React applications. Okay, that's the nullish coalescing, or something. That's a really strange word for me to pronounce. Then we can end it with a little neat feature here that's called BigInt, because before, if you look here, old max number, this is the maximum number that you can use in JavaScript. And sometimes maybe when you calculate your code empire's profit, you need a much bigger value than that or something, or maybe not, I don't know. So that's the max old number, and now we can create new big number equals, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we can have a lot of zeros here. And if you put an n at the end, we can make this a BigInt. So save it. And it won't complain now, of course. So we console log out. Maybe we can do it below the other one. Be consistent. Console log new big number. And we have the new big number const. Auto format it and save it. And as you can see here in the bright green, we have the new big number. It's totally legit to use big numbers like this now. So that's also a nice little feature that's in ES2020. It's called BigInt, and you can use really large, really big numbers. Okay, so that was my 5 favorites of the ES2020. There are more of them, so just Google around a bit on ES2020 and you'll find more features. Hope you enjoyed this one. Please make sure to subscribe to my channel for weekly videos on JavaScript, HTML, CSS, React, and all that nice stuff. See you in another one.